It's so wonderful to be with Winnie Byanyima. I know everyone watching this knows you so well. Of course, you led Oxfam. You're, the head of UNAIDS today, but I want to talk to you about beyond even UNAIDS because you're such a leader in this community, and we're going through a challenging moment. But you're also going through a challenging moment personally. So I want to just take a moment to ask you about that. Um, how is your husband doing? What is the situation that those of us in the development community who think the world of you should be aware of?
Thank you for asking, Raj, and your kind thoughts. Yes, my husband is in prison under facing charges under the military court. He's a civilian, he's not a soldier. But these are the things about struggling democracies. We have a leader who is almost 40 years in power
This is in Uganda.
in Uganda, and he's struggling. He wants to run next year for I don't know how many times, and he's worried about his opposition. Since the country opened up to democracy, like other African countries, our government has been struggling to adjust to living with an opposition. So there's always a criminalization of opposition leaders. It's not the first time. He's been brought before the courts, framed, and every time the civilian courts exonerate him, find him innocent. But today, he's been put under the military court,
Right.
which falls under the military, under him as the head of the army,
Sure.
and his son. The son has already said that my husband should be hanged, and even announced a venue and a date for the hanging.
I
So
saw that.
we don't expect the military tribunal that reports to him to find him innocent, but we're trying to get him back into a civilian court, which we know will always find him innocent. But the bigger point is that we do have many countries in Africa that are moving in the wrong direction. The opening to democracy, which came with the end of the Cold War, didn't lead to real entrenchment of democratic values, of human rights, of freedom of speech, and freedom of the enjoyment of human rights. Instead, now we're seeing militaries coming back in again. Ours is really a military regime because our president came in through a revolution,
Yep.
through the gun. We are a country that's never had a peaceful transition of power. So this is the context we are in, and I feel supported. I mean, the fact that you're asking me about it, so many human rights organizations, international community are seeing this as part of an assertion of strongman rule, of authoritarianism, of pushing back on civic and political rights. And we are just one case. And in that sense, I don't feel it so strongly personally. I feel supported by a movement of pro-democracy and pro-human rights actors.
Well, I know
That's
many
where I am.
many people watching this who think the world of you and of your work are going to be shocked to learn this news, and I know they send their well wishes to you and to your
Thank
husband
you. Thank
and to
you.
your family.
Mhm.
Let's move on and talk about some things that are happening in our broader development space. And it's obviously we're talking the day after Trump's inauguration.
Yes.
It's a big theme and topic here at the World Economic Forum in Davos. There's, people knew what to expect in a way, but it's also still shocking to hear that the U.S. is pulling out of WHO or pausing foreign aid. What is your feeling about this moment now? Not again just as the head of UNAIDS. We'll talk about UNAIDS and HIV specifically, but more broadly as an activist and leader in this space. What is your feeling about this moment we're living through?
It is, of course, regrettable that the new administration has given notice to withdraw from WHO, has given notice to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. These are all very, very worrying. But we must see this as part of a wider trend. I mean, but this is a country that's a leader in global health. For us in global health, this is very, very significant. And we can only ask the United States to reconsider its decision and come and address the issues it has within the WHO, because they play an important role since the founding of WHO in global health generally, in our institutions of health. American leadership has been so important in fighting and winning against smallpox. We've almost ended polio. All major health crises the US leads. Look at COVID. They came up with 2 vaccines before the rest of the world.
Right.
And we could have saved the whole world, but it was because the global rules allow companies to monopolize their product. But the product was there with American support. So we can only ask the United States to reconsider and return, because global health is global health. Diseases don't respect borders. And without the United States, we are weaker. We are weaker.
Some of the global development and health leaders I've spoken to feel a bit torn because they say, we know there are real reforms needed. The
Yes.
WHO is not a perfect institution.
No, it isn't.
Many other UN agencies, NGOs, and others, the system that's been built isn't necessarily as efficient and fit for purpose as it ought to be, right? And not enough money gets to the ground. And yet, now we may be forced into some kind of real change in our model by severe cuts. Is there any silver lining? Do you see any way in which these institutions that have struggled to transform might actually transform in this time?
Raj, you know that I am a critic of the global development system, particularly our area of global health. It is still very colonial.
Yeah.
It is still very much about a handful of countries that put money there to help poorer countries, that make the decisions, that set the rules, and the global economy doesn't even work well to support every country to grow its economy, to tax fairly, to get the money it needs for health and education of people. So I'm critical. But what I see now is that this could be a pivotal moment in global development. We may be at a point where we'll never see development funding returning to where it was.
Yeah.
The rules of development financing must change. So in a way, it's a shocking moment. It shocks the system because America puts in a lot of money. Definitely, all of us will have to adjust to less resources. But it's also a moment to rethink development financing. We need to do something about developing countries being able to raise enough domestic resources themselves. That's a whole piece of work about
Right.
the financial architecture. Raj, I was reading the Oxfam report. They have done a quick study that shows that because of the skewed global financial architecture, developing countries are sending out $30 million per hour, $30 million per hour back to the North to wealthy.
And this is in the
people
form
in
of
North.
debt repayments, right? And
The
interest
debt-
on the debt.
Yes, debt repayments, high interest rates. They pay higher interest rates because of the way these 3 companies that assess risk, that are all northern, they end up paying more. They borrow because they must borrow in dollars because the money is in dollars, and then they pay higher interest rates. So for every dollar of aid, $5 return to the rich countries. So the flow is in the wrong direction. So these countries will never pay for the health of their people, the education of their children, and aid will never fill the gap. So in a way, this is going to force us to rethink, to move faster on the reform of the international financial architecture, to move faster on the reform of the global corporate tax system, to close those tax loopholes that deny Africa about 90 billion dollars because of the ability to play with the rules and take out money without paying tax into tax havens. Tax havens are almost all in the north. and this is untaxed money. So these things in the global economy need to be resolved for the poorest countries to have half a chance to pay their way. So in a way, by America reducing its contribution in aid, may be forcing a rethink of changing the global rules that deny the developing countries the chance to raise their own money. So I'm scared. I'm worried that people may die. For us in health, American money is so important to keep people alive.
Particularly in health, right? I mean, it's so
Particularly in health.
outsized in the health
Yes.
space.
They're so big in the health space. Maybe another question should be, how did it get there?
Right.
we should be seeing more countries stepping up. There are new emerging economies. They should be filling more space in this area of solidarity on health, on education, on social protection. So we need to get the Chinas, the Brazils, the Mexicos, these big countries also now rethinking their role in building global public goods. Global public goods like these medicines for HIV, like investments in Marburg, which is the reason my colleague Tedros
Dr.
isn't
Tedros
here.
isn't here because Marburg virus is out. There's an outbreak
yeah,
in
so
Tanzania, right?
he had to fly there.
Yep.
So these global public goods like climate resources, climate adaptation money, we do need to also have middle income countries rethink and step up and play a stronger role in supporting global solidarity.
It's going to be a challenging moment, and in particular, maybe for the populations that you serve at UNAIDS. I'm thinking about the 25 million people on antiretroviral treatment today, most of that funded through PEPFAR and through the Global Fund. What do you think happens?
Here we are really watching
Mhm.
and crossing our fingers and hoping that America will not make any sudden withdrawal from its support in the global HIV response, because it's huge, like you said. It's the biggest supporter of this. You know that funding for HIV for many low-income countries, they are funded up to 95% externally for their HIV response, meaning that there are tens, hundreds of thousands of people living with HIV. Their daily tablets are paid for by perhaps 1/3 of it by the American government, the other 2/3 by the other donors. So Global Fund, PEPFAR are the two major funds. In the PEPFAR, of course, is 100% American money, close to 5-6 billion every year for 54 countries, most of them in Africa. Global Fund, 1/3 of it is American money. So if it were to go away suddenly, you're talking of people without their medicines, their daily tablets that keep them alive and healthy. So we hope that America will stay on course, that we'll work with them to grow. We've been developing sustainability roadmaps so that countries step by step work their way towards self-financing. But this is going to be a process over several years, and we want to walk with America on that journey. It is possible to end AIDS. We've got magical medicines out there for prevention and treatment. We can work to make America that put out the first, biggest, the only ever big single country program for global health, PEPFAR, to win this, to be the one that led to start the global response and the one to end it. We can work with them on that.
So what does this mean, do you think, for UNAIDS specifically? Your agency is much smaller, of course. You don't do project implementation. You're much more on the advocacy side. But UN agencies seem to be in the crosshairs of the new administration in the US. What are you hearing, thinking? What are you talking to your colleagues about?
We are small, but we play a critical role in the global response. We, we are the norm setters. We we are like the compass.
You've set the 90-90-90 targets, for
That's
example.
part of it, yes. So because we collect all the data, we are able to assess on the ground what are the opportunities, where can we be in the next 5 years, and we set the ambition. Then we support countries to put in place the right policies and mobilize the global resources that are needed through Global Fund and to help those who can't manage on their own. Now, if our little contribution isn't there, it's like having a car without a driver. The response will be leaderless. The data will be corrupted because there won't be one place where you have all the data. But more importantly, to develop that political will to pull the countries to agree on targets and to race to the target. That's our role. It won't be there. More importantly, also, you see, AIDS is an injustice. When you see who is newly infected, who is dying, there are people on the margins of society. Yeah. They are rejected, they are criminalized. We play an important role in every country to create a platform, an opportunity for those at risk to ask for what they want, to have services that work for them, whether they are gay men hiding from the law in Uganda or sex workers hiding from another government that crushes them, or girls who are preyed upon by even family members and schools and what. We create the platform for the right policies to be put in place and for their voice to be heard and for them to get what they need. If we are not there, you can't end AIDS because you have to reach those people and you have to serve them and reach them where they are. It's our role. So I'm hoping that, we will be able to survive and keep doing what we do, leading this response. But but let us also agree that when one country walks away, the whole world hasn't walked away.
Yeah.
The others will come together and try to fill the gap. It's always happened like that. It's not the first time. It will happen. We will get all the others to come and we will keep going. But the key thing is that aid is changing. We are not going to go back to those days when aid was in huger amounts and organized the way it was. Things are going to change.
Just one final word, because I've got to get you back to this conference. But many people watching this are feeling a sense of despair, right? Not just at the funding, but also at the theories and the ideas being put out there that are very contrary to some of the values that people in development have long espoused around human rights and civil rights. What do you say to those who are feeling some sense of despair? You've been an advocate for a long time in some very tough circumstances, including now. What short message might you have to them?
Raj, you always ask the right questions. It's not just a money issue. It's also a rights issue. Like I just said, I mean, we have 9 million people who are not on treatment, who are living with HIV globally. Out of those, a good number of them, it's not because there are no medicines in the clinics for them. They're in middle income countries. But it's a rights issue. They cannot get what they want because of stigma, because they are being fought for who they are, their sexual orientation, their gender identity. Unless rights are won for everybody, there will be people still getting infected and dying, even when you have science. So I'm worried also about this pushback on rights that's global. I can even say it, that we have always had to deal with some governments that will put money on the table for health, but who don't have that progressive view about human rights. But we are always able to build a consensus about rights, and we've won rights for sexual minorities, and with that space, we are able to deliver what they need for prevention and treatment. We have to keep pushing back against this pushback against human rights. That we have to do. And I am concerned that the new administration is giving us a pushback on human rights.
Yeah.
But we'll find a way to engage, and we have to keep pushing for the rights of those who are different, who are sexual minorities, who are gender minorities. We have to give them space to get what they want, to live good lives too.
Thank you so much for that message. Thank you for taking time, and I wish you all the very best with what's happening
Thank
with
you
your
so
husband and
much.
your family.
Thank you, and thank you for that personal note.